Hi guys, welcome to my channel. So today we are going to embark on an exciting journey as we build a new React project inspired by one of the greatest shows of all time, Game of Thrones. Are you ready to bring the world of Westeros to life on your screen? Let's get started. So first of all, let's talk about the tech stack we will be using. So we will be using React version 18, which is the latest version of popular JavaScript library for building user interfaces. And to make our development experience even better, we will be using Vite, a fast and efficient JavaScript build tool. So the next question should be why Vite? Vite has several advantages over other build tools. It is much faster, allowing us to see real changes and saving precious time in development process. So Vite also uses modern features of JavaScript, making it easier to write code that is both clean and efficient. In addition, we will be integrating with our REST API to bring in data about the world of Westeros. We will be using this API called Thrones API. And to make our website look fantastic, we will be using Tailwind CSS, a highly customizable CSS framework that allows us to create beautiful and responsive designs with ease. So, are you ready to learn about these tech and build something amazing? So, let's get started. So the first thing I want you to do is go to tailwindcss.com and here go to docs or go to get started. Next we need to go to this frameworks guide and we need to go to this Vite. So click copy this out and open your VS Code terminal. So we are already in the right directory where we want our app to be. So I'll paste it out and I want my app to be named got-yt and press enter. So now it is asking which framework we are going to use. So we will be using React and now it asks for a variant and we will be using JavaScript variant. So yes, it is built and now we need to change a directory. So cd got-yt and now we are in the correct directory. So now we need to install our dependencies. So we need to run this command npm and I for install. And as you can see, these dependencies are installing. And we are done with the installation process. So now we can do npm run dev to run our project. So we are running this on localhost 5173. So let's copy out this and go to a browser and click on new tab and here we go. So as you can see, like it is running and we have this cool animation from Vite and React as well. But the installation process is not complete. We need to set up Tailwind CSS now. So let's copy this out and let's close this process. Do Control C and this process is closed. Now paste the whatever we have copied earlier and press enter. And it is installing as we can see. And we are done with the installation. It has created two new files, tailwind.config.cjs and postcss.config.cjs for us. So the next thing we need to do is copy this thing and paste it out in tailwind.config file and paste it out. So we are done with this step as well. So last thing we need to do here is copy this and paste to our index.css file. So go to our src folder and click on this index.css file and copy this on the top. So we are done with this step as well and command J to hide our terminal. and we can remove all these. So we are done with this thing as well. So after this, all we need to do is to start a server. So we can again do npm run dev to start our server, and it is running again. And here we can see like no utility classes were detected in your source file. That means Tailwind CSS is working. So go to this and click on this. So Tailwind has applied some styles. So close this file, and I don't want this file app.css, so I can delete this out. Now this, we have this file called main.jsx, which is the main file for our app, and we have this app.jsx which is rendered inside this file, which means like it is a component for this. And we can go here, and I don't want any of this thing, so I'll just remove it out, and I'll just write a div out here. And I don't want these things either, so I'll remove these as well. So we are done with this thing as well. But before starting, I want you to install some extensions. So few of these extensions would be, the first one is this extension ES7 plus React Redux React native snippets. I want you to install this, and also I want you to install this extension Tailwind CSS IntelliSense, which is quite a good extension because like it provides IntelliSense for completion of classes, so which is quite important when you are working with Tailwind CSS. So install both of these extensions and we are good to go. So now come to a project, like what we need to build. So we need to build this. So we can see we have a Game of Thrones heading on the top, and we have this CSS grid out here, and yes, it is completely responsive. And we have these cards, and these cards are getting data from an API called Thrones API that we had discussed earlier. And when we hover over this card, we can see like it has a cool flip animation. Like when we hover on this card, the card flips and we get the information about the character. So without wasting any time, so let's get started. So as we can see, we have this heading on the top, so we need to build this thread heading first, and after this heading thing we can start with this grid thing. So first thing we need to do is build this heading. Before, like, what I'll love to do when I'm building all these things, I'll shorten this window to see like changes in real time. And so first thing I want you to do is like on div, I want you to give a class name property for classes, and like I want you to give it a minimum height of screen. Sorry, it is minimum height of screen. So which basically implies is that like it will be having a minimum height of screen, which means like minimum height of 100 VH, which means 100 viewport height. So after this I want it to have a width of full, which means width of 100%. And one thing I want you to do is to go to this file index.css, and I want you to remove this background color, and we are done with this thing as well. So after this, what we need to do is to give it a gradient background. So how we give a gradient background here, like we need to give it a class of bg gradient. So when you hover over this, like you can get the IntelliSense, like what class are we using, like minimum height of 100 VH and width of full, etc. We can get all this bg gradient to b, which means gradient is going towards bottom and we need to give the name of color from gray 900. So Tailwind CSS has its own colors and classes for colors, and like we have this gray 900 color out there. So it basically means like color starts from gradient color starts from gray 900, and after this we want to have a stop color, so I'll write 2 and gray 600. So this is what I want, and as we can see in real time, like the gradient color is applied to this background out there. So we are done with this thing as well. So after this I want it to have a padding of y of 10, which means like padding of 40 pixel on top and bottom. When you hover over these, like you can see like what classes it is applying and what property it is applying. Like you can see it is applying padding top of 40 pixel, padding bottom of 40 pixel. So, and you can always visit the Tailwind CSS documentation, like they have everything you need to get started with. And you can go here and click on documentation, search for any property, let's say search for padding. When you search for this, like they have a large number of classes for everything. You can go and search for the class and you can start. So we have already done with this gradient background. So next thing we need to do here is like we need to have this heading. So let's go to this and give it a heading of h1 tag. So give it a heading and write Game of Thrones. That is our heading. So as we can see, we have Game of Thrones rendered here. So let's apply classes to this. So class name. So first thing I want it to be in center. So text center, which means text align center. So it is in center now. As you can see, text align center, and we have class for this called text center. After this, I want to have a font size of text 3XL, which means font size of 30 pixel and line height of 36 pixel. So after this, thing about Tailwind CSS is like it makes responsive design so easy. All you have to do is like to add a breakpoint before a class. They have already provided a few breakpoints, like we have this small breakpoint, we have a medium breakpoint, and we have a large breakpoint, XL breakpoint, and so on. So like all we need to do is we need to do this thing SM, and we need to give it text of 4XL. So it basically means like it will be applied to a class, applied to screens with a minimum width of 640 pixels. So this is how easy it is in Tailwind to make responsive things. And after smaller screens, after medium screens, I want it to have a text size of 6XL. So as we can see, like this is how easy it is, and yes, it is completely responsive. So next thing I want to do is like to give it a font weight. So font extra bold, and which means the font weight of 800. So after this, as we can see over here, it has a gradient background. If you can notice, this text has a gradient background. So to give gradient background, we first need to give it a background clip text class, which means background clip property, and it is given a value of text. So next thing I need to do is to give it a text of transparent. As you can see over here, it is giving color of transparent to text. And now we need to apply the gradient. So BG gradient towards right, and it starts from indigo 200 via red 200 to yellow 100. And yes, we are done with this thing as well, and we can see we have a gradient over here. And this is how easy it is to make gradients in Tailwind CSS. So this is the thing I love about Tailwind CSS. It makes website designing so easier and faster, which is one of my favorite things about Tailwind CSS. Oh, I did a blunder over here. I wrote 3000 2000. So and we can have many colors over here, like we can have many colors, like I read 200, and we can add 2 or 3 or how many colors we want. So we are done with this thing, and after this thing what we have is this CSS grid. This CSS grid we have over here. So what we will do is we will make another component for this. So I'll click on this source folder and click on new folder, and we'll name this folder components. So this is a clean way of building things in React. Like you can build components and you can reuse them as well. So I'll give it a component. I'll give the component a name of main.jsx, which is our file extension. And if you have installed this extension called ES7 plus React Redux snippets one, so then you need to press RFCE. So we get this boilerplate for starting, and I just remove that because that is not required in over React 18, and pretty much I don't like to use it that way. So now coming on to the main file. So the first thing we need to do is to import a main file over here. So main, and as we can see we are already getting the path from IntelliSense. Press enter and we are done with this thing. So if it is rendered, then we'll see main thing. Yes, it is rendered over here. So now we need to go to this main file and we need to start working on this main component. So first thing I want is to like get the data from the API. So we will be using hooks, and hooks are basically spatial functions that are provided from React, and we can also make hooks according to our needs. So those are called custom hooks. So the first hook that we will be using is called useState hook. So think of it like a toy box. Your toy box has different style toys inside of it, right? Well, the state hook help us to keep track of what toys are inside our toy box. So if we want to take a toy out, we change the state of the toy box. That's what we do with the state hook in React as well. We change the state to show new information on our web app. So that is the state hook in a nutshell. It helps us to keep track of information just like a toy box keeps track of a state. So let's start with useState. So const and data set data is equal to useState. So we need to import this first. So useState and an empty array over here. So we initialize our state by calling useState function in our component. So useState accepts an initial value. This is an initial value and it returns two values. The first one is the current state, that is current data, and this is a function that updates the state. So if we go and update the data without this function, so it won't trigger the re-render, which is important thing for us. So we will be getting the data from the API and we will set the data into this component, this state, sorry. So now we need to use another hook. So that is really powerful, and that is called use effect hook. So the use effect hook is a way to tell React to run a function after rendering our component. So this function can be used to do things like fetching from an API, update the title of the page, or log events to console, and all those side effects. So let's start with use effect. So use effect. So now import use effect, and then so the use effect hook takes two arguments, a function and an optional array of dependencies. The function is an effect that you want to run, and dependencies are the values on which the effect is dependent. A dependency array is a way to control when an effect will run. So before starting this, so now we need to implement a function to get the data. So we'll go into this and we'll do const fetch data. As we can see, we are already getting is equal to async, and we are calling and we are writing an arrow function over here. So if you don't know async await, so I'll tell you. Async await is a way to write asynchronous code that looks and behaves like a synchronous code. This makes it much easier to understand and debug a code compared to using traditional asynchronous techniques like callbacks or promises that we used to do earlier. Here's how it works. The async keyword is used to declare a function as asynchronous. So if we have put this async keyword here, that means this function fetch data is going to be asynchronous, and the await keyword is used to wait for a promise to be resolved before moving on to the next line of the code. So this is what async await is. So let's start writing the code. So const res is equal to await, and we will be using fetch API from JavaScript. So fetch and string over here. So what we need to do is to put URL of the API we are going to use. So this is the URL of the API. You can copy this URL and paste it out here. As we can see, we have put this await keyword, which means which asks our code to wait, and once it is done, then go on to the next line. So const results that we are getting from the API is equal to await res.json. So after we are getting the results, what we need to do is to set the results into this data state. So set data and results. So we can what we are doing is like we are writing this console.log statement. So once we are getting the results, we are setting it to this state, and we are doing a console log to check if we are getting the data or not. So after this fetch data, what we need to do is to call this function. So we are done with this thing, and now click over here and go to a console, and we can see we get back an array of 53 length. So yes, we are getting back the data, and yes, we are getting back data over here. So this is the first element, and we can see we have first name, full name, Daenerys Targaryen, we got image URL, last name, and all these things. So let me explain you this thing that is very important in a use effect hook, and that is dependency array. So a dependency array is a way to control when the use effect hook runs. So it is an important tool for making sure that our components are efficient and performs well. So there are three main conditions that determines when an effect will run. The first condition would be if the dependency array is empty, like we have an empty dependency over here. So it means this use effect will run on the first render only. Like when the component first render, then only it is going to run. So we want it to fetch the data only when it is going to run for the first time. And if we write something over here, and if we remove this array, then it is going to run on every render. And if we give it some dependencies, like if we give it data, so it will run only when data updates. So this is the thing with dependency array. So, and we want it to run on the first render only, so it is empty over here. So now we are getting back the data and we are done with all fetching the data thing. So now we need to build this grid over here. So let's start. Remove this, and I just want to remove this as well. So we're done with this thing. So in dev, let's give it a width of 100% and give it a display of flex to make it, and align items center, justify content center. So after this, I want it to give a margin of 10 on both top and bottom, which goes around 40 pixel. So we are done with this thing. So after this, we got a div, and let's write over here hello. So this is the div where we are going to implement grid. As we can see, we are getting this hello in the center. So this is the work that this div and this flex box has done, and it has aligned everything into center. So after this, what we'll do, like we'll make the cards. So what we will do over here is, like if you know about the map function in JavaScript, one of the most important function in JavaScript. So the map function, if you don't know, so I'll explain. The map function is a way to take an array of information and create a new array based on that information. So it is this much simple. In React, we often use this map function to create list of components to render on the page. To use the map function, like for each item in array, the map function will call a function and create a new component to render. Like we have this array data and data.map. So for every item in this array, we are going to render this component. To do is, let's write s3 component, s3 tag over here, and give it a name of text of item dot full name. So it should render in this case, and yes, we can see we've got all full names from every single one. So the first thing we need to do over here is to give it a key, because what key does is, like it helps React to identify different components rendered during list. So let's give it a key of item.id. I'm not sure if it has this, so let's do a console.log of results, and let's console the first one only, results.0. So alt console log, we've got an object over here, and we can see, like yes, it has an id property. So we are done with this thing. So let's make a card component. So let's go to this, click on components, create a new file and name it card.jsx. So now we need to do RFCE, the shortcut for this, and we have got this card components. Let's render card component instead of this s3 tag. So card, and we've got the IntelliSense from VS Code, and yes, we are rendering card. So we can see, like card is rendered over here for the number of times it has, number of times the length of this. So go to this card, and we can see we have written card over here. So for every card it is rendering this, for every item in this it is rendering this. So let's give it a key of item.id. So we are done with this thing. So next thing what we need to do is, let's give it a height and width so that we can later start making grids. So let's go to this card component over here and start writing. Let's give it a class name and height of 72. So we can select these are rendered and it took 72, then it took 72, and it is basically 288 pixels, and give it a height width of full. So now it is time to create CSS grids. So if you don't know grids, so CSS grid is a powerful and flexible layout system that makes it easy to create complex and responsive designs for web. So with CSS grid we can create responsive designs that automatically adjust to different screen sizes and device types. So to use CSS grid, you start by creating a container element and then define the rows and columns within that container. So we'll start with this and class name and give it a class of grid. So we are done with this thing. Now what we need to do is, we have made this container grid container. So let's give it a width first. So for normal screens I want to give it a width of 5 by 6. Like width of 5 by 6 is 83.33% of the width of parent. So after this, for screens greater than smaller, so we'll give it a width of 4 by 5, which is something around 80%. And after this size, and let's give it a padding of 5 on x-axis as well. So like we aligned it through x-axis. So after this, what I want is, like, let's look over here. So what I want is, I want it to have one column when it has screens less than smaller, and after that when it has screens greater than smaller, then I want it to have two columns, and after medium size I want it to have three columns, and after large we want to have four columns over here. And it is so easy to use grids in Tailwind CSS. Like all we need to do is grid calls and one, so it will make columns for equi-width column. So it will automatically give it a width according to the needs. So we have grid columns 1. So after this, after smalls, we can give it a grid calls of 2. So as we can see over here, yeah, we've got 2 over here. So after this, after medium, I want it to have grid calls of 3, and after large, grid calls of 4. So yes, we are done with this thing. Let's give it a border so we can understand better. So let's go to card and give it a class of border. So yes, now we can understand better. We have 4 columns over here, and now in this case we have 2 columns. Before this we have 3, and now we have 1 column. So let's go to this main class and give some gaps between these columns. So let's give it a gap of 8. So now we can see for every, we have the gap of 8 on x and y axis as well. So now it looks better. So we are done with this thing now. So we have done with the implementation of grid. So let's understand and pass the data to these cards. So let's understand the data flow in reactjs and what props are. So React follows one-way data flow, or which is also called unidirectional data flow. So it basically means that data flows in a single direction. and it flows from parents components to child components. Like we can pass the data from parent component to child component, and we can't pass the data from child component to parent component. So we do this using React. We do this in React using props. So props in React are a way for a parent component to pass data to a child component. So they are similar to arguments in a function and can be used to customize the behavior or appearances of a component. So these are very much important, and when props change, the component re-renders. This is another important thing about props. So let's start giving it props. So go to this, and the first prop should be, so what we I want you to do is open your console, and let's look over here, resize this. So first thing I want you to send to this your card is its first URL. So URL is equal to item dot URL. So what it basically means is like it is sending URL from here to its children component. So after URL, first name I want you to send, or what we can do is like we can send the whole data at one at a time, but I want you to show how like we can pass multiple props in to a children component. So item dot first name, after this I want to send a last name, so item dot last name, and the last one, so I got a title, item dot title, and after this I want to have a family, item dot family. I'm getting all these from here, like you can look, we have these properties for this object. So I'm just sending all these to a children component. So this is the first step of passing props. First you need to pass these from this component. So after this we need to receive it in this children component as well. So using receiving, what we can do is like we can receive it like this props, but it is not preferred. Like what we usually do in React is we destructure this, and we have title, and we have first name, last name. It is giving me useless suggestions. First name, last name, we have title, we have family, and URL. So we are getting everything we are sending from here to here. So what it basically means is like it is sending the data that is required to for every card. So for every card it is sending different data. This is the thing. So like you can do a console log to check if you are getting the data. So let's do a console.log. Let's do everything. So it's going to be very tragic for you to see this, but we are getting it back. So this is the thing we wanted to check. So yes, we are getting the data back. So now it is the time to start working on this component, card component. So let's start with this. So the first thing I want to have is a cursor point. I'll remove this border and give it a cursor pointer. So cursor pointer basically means is like this property in CSS, cursor, and give it a property of pointer. So we are done with this thing also. So after this I wanted to give it a class of group. So when you need to style an element based on the state of some parent element, we generally use this called group. So it is very much used these days, like when you want to do something on basis of parent, so we generally use this. So after this what I want is to make another div inside this, and in this div what I'll do is like start giving class names, but I'll give that later. First thing I'll do is like implement image. So I'll create another div inside this. So div, and I'll give class, sorry, image. So image src, and we have already URL for this, and alt, let's give alt, and let's give first name as the alt, and now it's time to give class names. So class names, the first class I wanted to have is height of full, so whatever height its parent component has, and width of full, rounded xl, which is basically border radius. So in this case we have a border radius of 12 pixel. After this, object cover, which is basically object fit cover. After this I want it to have a shadow of large, and after this we need to give the color of the shadow white and 30. So it basically we are rendering this color over here. So we are done with this thing. So after this div, I want to have another div for all those text and everything. So let's give it a div, and we are not working on that first. So now we need to start looking at some concepts that helps us applying in the 3D things. So the first thing over here is perspective property. So the perspective property in CSS, if you haven't used, is used to create a 3D effect for elements on a web page. So it specifies the distance between user and the 3D element, so giving it a sense of depth and distance. So the perspective property is applied to a parent element, and its children will inherit this 3D effect, and we want this 3D effect for this thing. As we can see, we have this 3D animation, this flip animation. So what we will do is go to this first div and give it a custom CSS property, and let's give it a custom CSS property perspective of 1000 pixel. So this is the first thing I want you to do, and after this let's start styling this class. So first thing I want is to be position to be relative. After this let's give it a height of full, width of full, rounded xl, border radius, and then let's give it as some shadow xl. So we are done with this thing. So after this, if you have it, so we need to give this div some transform style of preserve 3D. So if you don't know what preserve 3D is, so when the transform style property is set to preserve 3D, child elements of an element are rendered in 3D space. This basically means that the child element can be positioned in front or behind some other elements. So this is the work of this property called transform style preserve 3D. So we'll go over here and give style and transform style preserve 3D. So we are done with this thing. So after this, as we can see, as you can refresh over here, like we are getting things back from there. What is the issue? Like why it is not rendering the image? We go over here. Oh, this is image URL. So we did a blunder over here. So this property is image URL, and we wrote just URL. So let's change it to image URL. So yes, now it is working fine. Now we are getting images back from there. So what we will do here is like go to card.jsx only, and let's give this div a position of absolute, and inset to be 0, which basically means is like top, bottom, right, left, everything to be 0. So now it is inside this card only. So after this thing, what I want to do is like to have some transition effects on this div. So I'll go and write some transition things. So first, for all transitions, so if you don't know this property, so it sets transition property all, transition timing function this, and duration of 150 ms. So after this, let's set a duration of 500 milliseconds, and on group hover, as we have already discussed about what group does is like group hover transform and rotate y 180 degree. So we are done. What we are basically doing is like it is a great thing provided by Tailwind CSS. Like we are writing this CSS property inside class name. So this is really cool. Like all we need to do is like put it into these braces, and we are done with this thing. So like what we are doing over here is like whenever we are hovering on this div, so this class will be applied. So this is the thing from group hover. So you get this effect. So we can see like we are already getting this flip animation over here, but on both of side what it is basically doing is like it is going towards back. So what we need to do is like to build this back side for this. So let's go and start working on this. So first thing I wanted to do is style and transform rotate y of 180 degree. So I want this to rotate also, and back face visibility to be hidden. So back face visibility is a very easy property. So what it basically does is like it determines whether or not the back face of element is visible when the element is rotated. So like if we have set it to hidden, so back face won't be visible. If it is like, I will style this first and I'll show you how to do this thing. So what we need to do over here is let's start applying class names for this. So class name, and it is already suggesting me class names. So first thing I want to do is absolute inset of 0 and height of full, width of full, rounded XL, which means border radius of 12 pixel, and I want it to be aligned to be center, text center. We are done with this thing as well, and background of black and opacity of 80. So after this only, like we can see we are already done with half of the things. So what basically it is doing is like when it is first rendering, it is showing this element, this image, and the text is going behind this scene. So when we are hovering, this text is coming in the front and the image is going behind. So this is what we are doing in this animation. So after this thing, After this opacity of 80, I want it to have a padding of 3 in all directions, and let's give a text color of text slate and 200, and I want it to be flex column, so flex and flex direction column. And after this, let's align these horizontally and vertically. So item center to align to render this class align item center and justify center. So we are done with all these things. After this, we need to first, what we have over here is, like, we have first name, this last name, this title, this family. We have all these things over here. So first we'll go to start with h2 element, so h2, and we'll render first name. So if you over here, as we can see, we are getting, so everything is working according to a plan. So h2 class name, and let's give a text of 2xl, and after smaller screens, text of 3xl, font weight of extra bold, and now it looks fine. So let's copy this element and paste it again, and let's change it to last name. So yes, now it is looking good. So after this, after these s2 elements, we will be using s3 element for title, and h3 class name, text of base, which means this font size of 16 pixel. After smaller screens, I want it to be text of large and font semi bold, which means a font weight of 600, and after this, margin of 2 on top and bottom. So yes, it is working fine, but I did something wrong over here. Like, I need to write the title in span, so title, and I'll give a span over here, span, and now I'll write title. So I'll style this span as well. So span of class name, so text slate of 100, and font of medium, which basically applies font weight of 500. So now it is looking like what we have done. h3 over here also, and last thing I want is family, and I'll remove, and I'll write family over here only, and now it is working fine, and it is like looking so good. It is looking so good. And let's resize this. It is looking so good. So we are done with this thing, and we can come over here and compare, like, everything we had planned, we are getting according to that. So we are done with this project, and you can see it is completely responsive as well. We've got this cool box shadow over here, and we've got this cool animation. So we are done with this build. So after doing all this, all we need to do is deploy this to showcase it to someone, because no one is going to come and look at our local computer. So let's start with deploying the deployment process. So first thing we need to do is, what I kind of like to do is, like, I'll close this folder and open that folder only in our workspace. So it is there in my Vite. Open this folder out here, and now we are in the root of this folder. So now what I want to do is, like, initialize a Git repository. So open a repository. So we have already have this repository and we want to have this production build. But before this, what I want you to do is do npm run build to build this, and now it is building and now it is done with that. So now run npm run preview to check if our build is done correctly or not. So we need to run on this server. So copy and paste it over here. So yes, it is working absolutely fine. So close this as well. Done with build as well. So we need to publish it to GitHub. So we'll initialize the repository. So yes, I want all these commits. So plus to stage all commits, and I want, now we need to write a commit message. So let's write commit message final done and commit, and now publish branch. So I want to have a repository got vite2, you can name it whatever you want. So I want it to be public, so got vite2 repository. And as we can see, now it has successfully published it to GitHub. Now you can go over to your GitHub and check if it is published or not. Yes, it is published, as we can see over here. Yes, it is published. So now we need to go to Vercel for deployment. So let's go to vercel.com, and I've already signed up to vercel.com, but all you need to do is, like, go to this sign up over here and log in using your GitHub account and you will be done. So I'm logging in, and once after doing all the needfuls, you will be redirected to this dashboard. So then click on this add new and project. So after this, since it has already linked to our GitHub account, so we are getting this got vite2 repository over here. So and it is already showing this logo of Vite. That means that Vercel has already read the repository and knows that it is a Vercel project. So click on import, and yes, you can name it whatever you want, and click on deploy, and you can have a look at the deployment going on. So this is building and it will take some time, and yes, it is done. So this is how fast Vercel is. And now if you click over here, it will send to you to the link, and this is the deployed URL, and we have successfully deployed as well. But one thing we missed is, like, we didn't change the title of the page. Then to change the title of the page, all you need to do is, like, to go on to this index.html file and replace it with whatever you want. Let's name it Game of Thrones or whatever you want. So we are successfully done with this project. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more content just like this. So, and let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to hit the bell icon to never miss out a video from me. Thank you.